To introduce this next product, we thought it would be interesting to take a little trip into our historical archives in the engineering department and pick out a few of our ancient samples of 8-inch woofers. The 8-inch woofer has always had a special place in the JL Audio lineup. Mr. Pony loves designing small drivers that really perform, and they were really at the very beginning of the company. This speaker right here has a lot of historical significance. It's the 8W2, and this was produced in the mid and late 1980s and was really the first JL Audio subwoofer driver, and it was an 8-inch. Unlike today's small drivers, this speaker was designed to operate in a fairly big ported box by today's standards. It would work in about 1¼ cubic feet, and the reason for that was that amplifiers back in those days were very small. You had maybe 50 watts a channel as a typical amplifier, maybe 70 watts a channel was a big amplifier. So the reason for making them work in a big box is that the speaker could be made more efficient. So you could get more output with less power by using a larger enclosure. So the original 8W2 was somewhat of a big ported box design rather than the small sealed box design that you guys are used to today. The other interesting product we had back in the early 90s, mid-90s, was the 8IB4. This was the only paper-coned JL Audio speaker line, and it was specifically engineered for infinite baffle operation without an enclosure. So like the 8W2, it was a very efficient speaker. It had a very light cone, a light moving mass, and it sounded absolutely fantastic in IB configurations and was very popular with sound-off competitors and a lot of people who really appreciated the way it sounded in those types of applications. As we moved into the mid-90s and the late 90s, things kind of changed a little bit. Amplifiers started to become bigger and more affordable for higher power, so you could buy a bigger amp for about the same money it took to buy a small amp a few years before. As that happened, the need for a small box, high power handling woofer really emerged, and that's where we started to focus our efforts in the mid-1990s. The original 8W6 here was really quite a groundbreaking product. In addition to having dual 6-ohm voice coils and a very beefy motor structure for its day, the 8W6 had a lot of excursion capability. This particular one's been through a couple of wars back in the engineering department, but it is one of the original 8W6s. W6s really changed the game in car audio by introducing and popularizing the small box, long excursion woofer concept, and became a very successful product for JL Audio for many years. This was in production for quite a long time. Following on the heels of that was the original 8W1, which was also a small box woofer. This is what was used in the original microsub products back in the 90s, which were very popular. And this was an affordable, high-performance, long excursion design that was very successful for many, many years as well. Later, we followed the 8W1 V2, or the 8W1 V1 over here with the 8W1 V2, which you guys have been selling for many years now and should be quite familiar with. This is an absolutely wonderful product. It actually has close to the same excursion as the original W6. It's a very capable product, and also operates in a small box and has a few of our patented technologies like elevated frame and other things that we introduced at that time. So this year we're really happy to reintroduce the W1 8-inch woofer. When we initially announced the W1 V3s, we announced a 10 and a 12, and a lot of people said, hey, what about the 8? Where did that go? Our intention at the time was maybe to test the waters and see if we could get away without doing an 8 in that line. But it was clear from a lot of feedback that we got from dealers and from consumers that there was still a need for the 8W1 because it has a shallower mounting depth and obviously a lower cost than the 8W3V3, and it still has its niche. So the engineers went to work really hard. It has the new dark cone look with the silver foil logo. And it also has a much nicer motor structure that has machined back plates and machined top plates, a lot higher end in appearance. It doesn't have the rubber boot anymore, but it really shows off the metal parts really nicely. So if you're trying to showcase the woofers in an install, this can give you a really nice nice appearance. It also has a dark basket instead of the silver basket of the 8W1 V2. There is also a technical change to the product. Physically, it hasn't changed in terms of dimensions very much. There's just a minuscule increase in mounting depth. But what we have done with the 8W1 V3 is actually optimized it better for smaller enclosures. So now this woofer works in smaller sealed and ported boxes than the 8W1 V2 did, which will give you more flexibility in using it in tight spaces. So it's shallower than the 8W3 V3, obviously. You can see the two here side by side. This is the woofer we use, for example, in the famous CP108 micro sub enclosure, which you guys are obviously very familiar with. It's our best-selling enclosed product. This woofer can be used in even tighter space applications than the 8W3 V3. And of course, the big dog is still in the line if you want to do something extreme with a smaller driver. The 8W7 requires a larger enclosure, requires a lot more power, has more than twice the excursion of these two guys right here. And it's obviously intended for a more extreme installation situation. So here you have the current lineup of JL Audio 8-inch subwoofers, the 8W1 V3, the 8W3 V3, and the 8W7. For your extreme installation applications, the 8W7 is the top dog. The 8W3 V3, when you need more power handling than the 8W1 V2 can offer, and more output capability because it has more excursion capability. And for the tightest space applications, you now have the 8W1 V3, which should become a really popular woofer for those very reasons.